It was okay for that person to make mistakes. They may do it differently, and that's okay. They may make mistakes, and that's okay. Sometimes you just have to be okay with them falling and learning from it.
Every CEO I work with, is their number one accountability is to build and empower an A-level leadership team. That's truly when you start seeing people rise up, and the more that senior leadership team rises up, it raises up that CEO, which then in essence raises the entire company.
You're the conductor of the orchestra. You're not playing the horn section or the string section.
Yep.
You're the one that's telling everybody what to do. And that's the analogy I like to paint. But it's still hard. I mean, it's a hard transition, but that's ultimately what you have to get to. When you put it all together, you make beautiful music.
Welcome to another episode of Escape the CEO Doom Loop podcast. I'm Glen Dahl with Apex North Business Coaching. We have John Ninkovich from Performance Coaching in the Detroit area. And here with us today, we have our esteemed guest, Bill Costello, who is the CEO of Streeter Custom Builder, which is a luxury custom builder here in the Twin Cities. Bill and I and his team and company have been working together for about 5 years now.
Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to participate in this. It actually is that Glen and I and a couple other coaches, about 3 years ago, I think now, Glen actually went out and did a CEO research project. And what we were trying to understand is really what were the things that CEOs were thinking about? What were the things that's top of mind? And then what were the things that were kind of keeping them up at night? And what do you do about all that? So after we went and did 72 interviews kind of across the globe with CEOs, we took the research, put it all together, and we created this white paper that we call the CEO Playbook. And one of the key things we saw in that was really this thing called the Doom Loop. And so we're here today to really talk about what that Doom Loop is, how it shows up, what are the things that we can do to navigate around that. So that kind of foundation, Bill, let's talk a little bit about the CEO Doom Loop. What's your perspective of it? Have you felt the CEO Doom Loop? When does it kind of show up? And what are some things you think about when that happens and what you need to do to navigate as the CEO of your organization?
Yeah, thanks for having me on today. I'm really excited to share our story and especially the successes we've had with Glen and Metronomics. The Doom Loop, for us, it's a little different for me in that I wasn't CEO when we entered Metronomics. So I came in as director of operations at that time, and our bigger challenge was sort of figuring out which we were going with this company, which I think we'll get into later. So I had really good prep work with Glen coming into it, into the role of CEO, which happened about 2 years ago. All that said, it doesn't mean that I hit a home run right out of the gate. So I think part of it was for me, especially coming from the operations side, it was very hard for me to give that up. And so I actually retained the title of COO when I first took the CEO role.
Until when, Ben? When?
Oh, really? So just
A few months
recently?
ago. It was almost a year to the date.
Okay.
Because I went back and checked. When we made the change, it was May of last year. So
Not according to your LinkedIn, but
yeah. So it took me a while to embrace a lot of what Glenn taught me. And so in terms of my ability to get out of that loop of trying to control everything and really stay in my role as head of company and strategizing and being a visionary, that took time. For me, it was about trust in a lot of ways. So in order for me to trust the next person up, I sort of had some unofficial criteria in my head that I'd be comfortable when sort of these things. And I sort of realized, especially with Glenn's coaching, is there is no perfect time, but if there's a structure in place, if there's a process in place, that person can succeed, especially if I'm doing my job as a coach. So if my duties as CEO is to oversee and elevate our senior leadership team, then that person should have a better chance of succeeding if I'm doing my job and advocating for them and for the system. And so with that guidance, I was finally able to let go.
So what was that transition from running operations to running the company? And then what was the relationship that you had with the other people in the organization that now you're the CEO running the company? What was that dynamic like?
Yeah. I've been with the company 13 years. We've been coaching with Glenn under Glenn's tutelage for 5. But we had the benefit of time. So that transition took a while. So we started with Glenn 5 years ago. I became CEO 2 years ago. So we had about 3 years to kind of roll this out, and which was, I think, important because I think we gained some momentum, right? I think if it had been instantaneous, I think it would have been harder for people to buy in and weigh in. It would have been a little abrupt. And so getting in there, getting the owners on board, it sort of evolved, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. It was 100% evolution. I just tell a story about when we first started working together. I asked Bill, how many on your leadership team? And he said, what? 12.
Well,
Like, oh, that's what is it? I mean, that's kind of a big number, but okay, we'll figure that out.
yeah.
We set the table for 12 placards for each person, their name and their title, and 6 people had the same exact title. Director of Business Development.
Well, they were director and there was business development to the year.
And okay, so 12 people were set up, 10 showed up for the meeting. On the second morning, one of them said, Glenn, I got to tell you, I have no idea what anybody does here at this company. So we basically spent a whole day going through functional accountabilities.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The evolution of those original 12 invited, there are now 2 that are on the leadership team of 7, right? Is that correct?
Well, now it's 5.
Oh, 5.
Okay.
As of
Yeah.
this morning.
Yeah. Oh, 5.
Yeah.
2 on a leadership team of 5.
Yeah.
But yeah, John, back to your question in terms of how the transition went, I think part of it was backing up the lip service. So as we started to project vision and as we started to talk about initiatives and what we wanted to do, it was the follow through. I think that got people to subscribe. I think if it had just been lip service and then it was business as usual, I think we would have lost a lot of people right away. So, and to be truthful, we did lose some people. And Glenn warned us of that when we first started this process, was that we're invoking a lot of change. Change is hard for a lot of people, and not everyone's going to subscribe to it, especially it's a family legacy company. I'm not a family member. And so you're going to lose some people. And we did. But I will tell you, with the exception of maybe one person, I don't regret any of them. But it's all for the better.
Yeah.
I think it's made us a better company.
You've been CEO for 2 years. So I guess as you think about going from running operations and then becoming the CEO and then really integrating this with the concepts around the doom loop, it's kind of cool to be the CEO or the owner, and then you're in that seat. And there's a lot of days that are lonely because you're at the top of the organization and that whole organization is looking at you to set the direction. So talk about a couple of instances where the CEO of the company was described, any kind of indecision or fear of failure that we've seen. What's that look like for you?
Yeah, I think in our instance, as we started to think about additional flywheels, and I don't know if that's a common concept, the flywheel, but as we thought about a company, we're a construction company, and we were looking at expanding other verticals within our space, which is sort of critical in residential construction in particular. We considered buying a cabinet shop. So doing our first acquisition, right? And so thankfully we were in a pretty good cash position to do so. But as CEO, I felt a huge burden of a lot of what this cash was a lot of people in the company had contributed to, right? What was sitting there in the vault was the success that we've had over a lot of years. And so the burden and weight of that decision to now take that cash and put it somewhere outside of the company, there was a heaviness to it. Even our owners, and especially Nate, one of my colleagues, he's one of the owners, we were really able to talk it through and really think about the vision. And what it really amounted to was having that bigger vision and really believing in that. I think if we didn't have such a strong vision of where we wanted to go, in the short term, it probably didn't make a lot of sense. But because we were so committed to that long-term vision, it made the decision that much easier. But for a while, I was uncertain. And I think at one point I even said we weren't going to do it because of the heaviness of using the company's money.
Yeah. So did you get that deal done?
4/32 on December 31st.
You remember that very clearly,
December 31st, and we got it done. But there was a little snafu the day out from the seller, but we were able to work through it and get to where we needed to. And I still obviously believe in it, and it's doing really well, and it's contributing to our bottom line.
John, you'll appreciate this. I think probably about 18 months before that, there was an opportunity for another acquisition that in one of our strategy sessions, the senior leadership team and Bill were talking about this acquisition. And we have this tool that we use, right? It's called the key function flow map. And that really maps out like the flywheel of the company of how we make money. And we're talking about, and we still had that up on the wall as we're talking about this next step evolution of potentially acquiring the other company. And one of the senior leadership team said, well, how could we go buy another company when we
Yeah,
still have
it's a
work to
great
do
question.
on the foundation of our company?
Yeah.
It was a
Yep.
really great question. It was a really great observation.
Yeah.
It's something I think that we used then when we were talking about a year and a half later buying the cabinet shop.
Yeah.
And Bill and the team were like, no,
So
we're
you
ready.
progressed.
This is good.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And in fact, let's say we use that very same, the KFFM flow
Awesome.
chart with our new business, with the cabinet shop, as a way to assess it, do a deep dive on what we acquired and their processes and that sort of thing. So
That's
it's
cool.
a tool we've used
So
twice now.
you'd mentioned the
effect.
vision a couple times in our conversation. So I guess my question is, when you were heading up operations as a member of the leadership team 5 years ago to being the CEO 2 years ago, do you think that your vision and the vision of the organization changed at any one of those points in time?
I would say what I think changed for me personally is that it sort of became limitless. That's a big part of why we decided to work with Glen, is that Nate, who's one of the other owners, and myself were sort of given the keys to the kingdom about 5.5 years ago, because we were sort of spinning for 6 months on, okay, the owners just told us that you guys are going to take over. You guys are taking over the company. And it's like, great. Now what? So we spun for a while. Part of it was understanding, and Glenn was critical of this, is what do we have?
Yep.
What's in the back seat? And then from that, where do we want to take it? And so I think Glenn was really great about pushing us to see bigger and broader and really understand what we had and where we could take it. And that was very exciting for me. I'm a creative person by education and training and all of that. And so to sort of have that dream state, but based in reality, was pretty exciting for me as CEO to really not ratchet that up. I think we struggled with it for a while in terms of coming up with that vision,
Right.
and we limited ourselves. Glenn will tell you, it wasn't audacious enough.
Yeah.
And I kept envisioning, okay, we've just created this great vision and we're going to present it to the company, and it just falls flat. In terms of what we were producing originally, I just sort of like, who cares? So I'm like, we've got to put something up here that's meaningful and inspiring, right?
Yeah.
If not, what the hell are we doing? And so we pushed and pushed, and then finally came up with our 10-year goal, which is that the Streeter Way will be known nationally. And so to think on a national level was a big deal.
Yeah.
And frankly, people were scared of it, thought it was too much. But
Why are we going to do that?
why are we going to do that? And that's a big part of all of this in terms of the sell, right? As CEO, I have to not only provide the vision, but sell the vision. So in selling is selling the why. So why does it matter to the person that's putting together a 2x4 wall on a site? Why does that matter to them? So we really had to think about how that vision transcends to every level of a company and then sell on it. And that took a while. We didn't have buy-in right away, or it was just sort of what I talked about earlier, just lip service and that sort of thing. But I will say, we've achieved our goal. So
awesome.
Our company is now known nationally in the space that we operate in. And what's great about that is not only from an external standpoint, but internally, it has brought real benefits to the company in terms of how we do business, our profitability. Part of that is the learnings we've had from working outside of our city, and partners, the relationships, the types of projects we're working on, and people are seeing that, right?
It's not just words on a page. It's like, how do you communicate it and make sure that
Exactly.
it's integrated into the fabric of the organization, how you communicate, how you meet, how you set goals, all that kind of stuff, right?
100%.
Yeah. So one of the questions, I guess, is that you've been working with Glenn as a coach for 5 years. What transition have you seen from the organization when you started 5 years ago and you were part of the leadership team today as a CEO? What was the value of coaching? What impact has it made on the business for you today?
I think it's unfortunate that I didn't recognize the strength of
Yeah.
the word metronomics right away. Obviously, I know what it means and all of that, but that steady rhythm of rinse and repeat is something I didn't fully appreciate until recently when we've gotten a really good senior leadership team together. So Glenn was really instrumental in, one, setting up those rhythm, helping us set that up, and then holding us accountable to the rhythm that we kept repeating. Get in a rhythm, keep repeating.
Yeah.
And so that's led to consistency, not only with our senior leadership team, but then with the company. They understand the cadence of things, why we do things, the messaging is consistent, and that has helped buy-in considerably. So the effects on our company is, I feel like we have a much greater culture in terms of advocating for each other, teamwork. Previously, you can imagine in
Wow.
construction, there's sort of this
Yeah.
natural divide
Yep.
in management and the field, right? And so how do you bring those two things together where there's sort of inherent tension in terms of bringing people together, valuing them and showing that we value them? Is something that's come out of all this. And part of that is through listening and then bringing
Yeah.
real effect to that listening. So listening, hearing them, making improvements based on that feedback. But when I was still director of operations and we sort of had a CEO, but kind of not really. Myself and Nate were notified on December 23rd that we were going to be in the hole that year. So we were negative. So when I first became CEO, we were in the red. And I'm happy to report that this year will be
awesome.
above $3 million in that net income. And so that just helps. That's sort of the evidence of the methodology, is being able to provide those numbers. And that shows, because one of the things we implemented was essentially profit sharing. And so people are benefiting from that. And that was
Yeah.
part of it, is if we're going to benefit, they have to share in it. And so they're now seeing larger bonus checks than they've ever seen before.
Great perspective. I love your analogy about the metronome. It's funny, when I joined Metronomics, it'll almost be 5 years ago, I didn't know what a metronome was. I wasn't a musician, so I didn't know what it was. And it's interesting, you said something about discipline and
Yeah.
structure, right? And so can you talk a little bit about how important that discipline, that structure, that rhythm of doing things consistently? Can you
Yeah.
talk about that a bit? And what would the
Yeah.
impact to the business?
Yeah, I mean, it's 100%. We had a meeting with Glenn. He had been referred by a friend and client. And we walked out of the meeting and I said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it. We're going to be committed to it. We have
Yeah.
to commit. If we can't commit, meaning especially him and I, we can't do it, because we will not realize the full effect of what this could be. And so the discipline comes into committing to that process. And so it's setting aside a time every week. So we as a senior leadership team meet twice a week. At first seem like a burden, but once you start
Yeah.
getting into it and realize the benefit to it, it improves communication. It improves that meshing, getting everyone on the same page
Yeah.
and working well together. Comes with frequency and rhythm. And so that's where that comes in, is committing to that frequency of meetings, committing to that time,
Yeah.
and committing to the value of it as well. And so really respecting what comes out of those efforts and conveying that to the team. We're all ambassadors to what we're doing. So getting consistency in the messaging around what we're doing, and then just
Yep. Staying
Doing
on
it.
rhythm, right?
all the time.
Yeah. Again, it's not always sexy. It's not always fun, but it's like
Yeah.
kind of working out, right? If you don't do it, you don't get the results that you want. And it's the same thing running a business. And I don't think there's any magic to it. I really think a lot of people think running a business, there's magic. There's not. There's just a lot of foundational stuff you got to continually do to get to where you want to get to.
Bill brought a lot of team in, senior leadership team, and we actually brought in someone who had worked with a local fine dining restaurant chain. And one of the things that we learned about was how in fine dining, you think it's always creativity and these chefs, but
Yeah.
really the way they deliver a consistent experience is that everything is process driven and choreographed. And I think the phrase that they taught us was,
Automate the ordinary,
That's
elevate
awesome.
the extraordinary.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
So in other words, if you get into
Yeah.
these rhythms, it sort of becomes second nature.
Yeah.
Just like typing, right? So
Yeah.
it's all muscle memory. And so you get into that rhythm, allows you the space and the freedom to then focus
Yeah,
on those
for
things
sure.
that
Yeah, I
elevate you
love
and
that.
propel you to the
So
next
let me
level.
ask you this, and I'd love to hear Glenn's perspective on this too, because as a coach, I have some perspective about where my clients think they're at and where I think that they're at. And hopefully we're aligned on that. Sometimes we're not. But what were you tolerating for too long as a
Mhm.
leader, as a CEO?
Wow, that's a great question.
I know this.
Just because it's really relevant, especially today when a member of our senior leadership team resigned. What I tolerated too long is lack of accountability and really holding people to what we've set forth together. That's part of it, is so much of these expectations we've worked on together as a team, and me tolerating them not fulfilling that. Even though we had been very good about a plan and putting a plan in place and working on that, I tolerated tenure. Someone had been with the company a long time and sort of fearful of the repercussions of letting that
Yeah.
tenure go probably prevented me from doing what I should have done. It's all worked out fine now in the end, but there's been some collateral damage as part of that.
We want people to be successful. We care about them. And sometimes we want it more for them than they want it for themselves.
Yeah.
I think you run into those things. What do you guys think accountability means today?
It's a great question. I try not to sound like an old man and talking about the younger generation
No.
and all of that sort of thing. But I think where we struggled was sort of deciphering between company as family or company as team. It's a lot different when there's accountability as a team member versus as a family member. And our approach had been the former, that a lot of people treated it as family. And so a lot of forgiveness, a lot of grace and that sort of thing. Whereas you think of a sports team and it's like, it's all in the stats.
Yeah.
If you're not performing, that's it. Boiling down their performance to numbers, to metrics, when I think so often there's a lot of touchy-feely, warm, fuzzy other things that people want to quantify and qualify.
They're so
Yeah.
nice.
Oh,
Everybody
nice. They've
loves
been
them.
here so long. They always bring in snacks on Friday. And I've heard that one, believe it or not. And so I think it's having the objectivity is a challenge. And what does accountability mean? I think it's really holding someone responsible for what we're asking them to do and what they've committed to do. So even outside of performance and metrics is I can justify my presence in this spot because while I didn't achieve these things, I have these other sort of non-quantified aspects that people like. And so I think accountability for a lot of people is just like what keeps me in the seat.
Yeah.
My definition of accountability is that I can count on them to get it done, and that we can both count that they got it done, meaning that there's some kind of measurement or metric to it.
I think you've been asked that before.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I have another one. Here's an alternate definition is how does one be accountable? You say you're going to do it, you do it, and then you say you did it. And just keep repeating that, and you're guaranteed success.
Members of the leadership team are unclear about what accountability means or don't want to be accountable or they don't know how to be accountable. What do you think about that, Bill?
I think not only our senior leadership team, but our company, I think that was probably Glenn's insight into when we were starting this program in terms of the potential collateral damage was people not wanting to be held accountable. That was the number one reason for people leaving, is that now we were assigning parameters, expectations, goals, and everything around their position, and they wanted nothing to do with it. And so, yes, it's a big challenge. But our senior leadership team, I mean, that's part of why we've evolved. So Glenn mentioned that we had 12 people to start off with, and we have 2 of those people that still remain.
Yeah.
And it's myself and the owner.
Some have stepped out on their own, and some were asked to leave. And I think it's part of the process. Once people realize, oh, this is where the company's going, and there's this accountability being put in place, I don't want any part of that.
Right.
Or maybe they just see like, you know what? I want something different for myself, or I have a different vision, or I understand the culture. And that's great because there's tons of teams out there. We want to make sure this is the right team for you and you're right for this team.
Yeah. I mean, for us, one of the big things was we tied bonuses to metrics. Wow, how's that for a concept? Previously, it was sort of a given. You were given sort of a percentage of your salary or base pay, regardless of your performance, your contributions, the company's well-being or anything. And so we changed that right away and said, hey, we want you to do well. We want you to perform well. We're going to reward you for it, but we have to be able to count what those things are. We implemented that, and that was part of that accountability some people decided to jump off of.
There's just like people out there that look at a paycheck and not really being accountable for anything. And it's pretty pervasive. And a lot of the companies that we get a chance to go work with is that's just kind of all over the place. And I love what you're talking about, Bill. Those are all the right things to really drive organizational performance. And people that want to be accountable, we talk a lot about A players, they want accountability. They want the metrics, the numbers mean something to them. And that's kind of how they keep score and validate kind of who they are. Am I doing a good job? And I want to do more than that, right? And so I think that's the journey, is figuring out what that looks like.
That's a great point, John. And I think maybe that's another qualifier for an A player, is that they want to be an A player. So oftentimes we're classifying them or categorizing them as such, but it's like, what do they want? Do they want to be an A player? And you're right. If I think about who some of our A players are, you're absolutely right. They want those metrics. They want to be measured. They want to show that they're improving and getting better.
When you started with the metronomics process 5 years ago, one of the things that we do as part of the human system is we're constantly doing ABC player rankings, right? So every quarter, we're ranking where everybody's at in the organization from an ABC player perspective. And not everybody in the organization knows that that's going on, but that's what's going on. We're talking about that. So can you talk a little bit about what that was like for you? It's interesting if it was different for you as the head of operations and the CEO, but can you talk about what that journey was about having to put people in a box and really be what I would say a true grader, an honest grader about where they were really at? What was that like for you?
It was an interesting journey for us because of the grading process. So if we were going through our whole team outside of the SLT, we had different definitions of what A, B, and C were at the time. So therefore, because we didn't have a consistent grading system or structure, the interpretation or grading was all over the place. So what one person felt was different than another. And so we struggled at first just to even get consistent grading. What I felt was an A, another person felt was a C. Therefore, it's like, okay, but where are we actually? And it wasn't until we started to really understand what it means to be an A player, how we defined it and valued that in the company, that then we sort of had a consistent baseline or measuring point to truly evaluate people. And so that, frankly, actually took a while.
Glenn, what was your perspective when you started to implement the ABC player process? What would you see as the coach trying to walk them through that journey?
One of the things that Bill touched on is I kind of liken
Yeah.
it to grade inflation in schools. Maybe giving some students A's that didn't really deserve them just to get them to move on or so that they wouldn't complain. And I think I saw that. And I see this other companies too, where some of the leaders would rank their team a little bit higher than maybe the rest of the team did. Or I would notice some employees would get ranked up as B's or A's, and then that leader would be complaining about them or complaining about some of the reasons why their department was a red or a yellow on the KFFM on some of the people. And ultimately, I think it probably is some shortcomings on leadership of recognizing like, oh, maybe I'm not a good leader, that I'm empowering these people to be true A players, or I'm not coaching them well, or I'm not even letting them know. I'm just giving them kind of a pass. Hey, you're an A player. That's great. Great job.
So you've talked a little bit about kind of the A-player process, which is really accountability. Where do people show up? We've talked about structure, rhythm, all those kind of things. How did your team respond to all this? Is that really the evidence that we see that basically your whole team has changed out and it is worth today through that process?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Certainly the turnover in it. Change is always tough. And so to get them on board with it took a little bit. And some people didn't subscribe to it and they were coached out or let themselves out. But I believe in the system. The people that are still in the room, I fully believe in. We feel great, very productive. There's some great synergies. So, and it's just a natural part of this process, right? One of the things at Whistler, there was this exercise through the 4 phases, right? Storming, norming, perform.
Change.
Yeah, the 4 phases of the team development, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And what I thought was interesting that Shannon had brought up was it's almost impossible to stay fully green the whole time, right? So once you get there, all it takes is one team member change to take you back down. And that was really profound for me because I always thought, well, the goal's got to be just keep it revving at green the whole time. But the importance of who's on that team is so critical to the success and the maintenance of that success that you have to take those assignments really seriously.
Yeah, and just like a sports team, it doesn't stay static over time. When you're playing JV football, that's not the same team that's going to get you to the Super Bowl. It's just not. Right. And as companies go through the various stages of growth and evolution, some people are able to grow with that and others aren't. And other people, that frankly, personal goals and ambitions may not coincide with the companies along that entire arc. And that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. It's really the leadership is being able to discern and coach along. And then when you need to is say, all right, we need to make a change here and bring in the next person.
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned Shannon, and we're talking about Shannon Susko for people watching this, but she's created a metronomics framework. And one of the things she talks about, which I thought was really powerful, when one person changes on a team, it's a new team. So when you add one person, remove one person, dynamics of that team are different. That's really powerful. So when that happens, we kind of have to go back to how do we almost regrouping and rebuilding that cohesion that team has to have. And if you don't do that, if you just assume we remove somebody and the team's different, like it's the same, it's not. It's just being thoughtful about really building that team and building that cohesive team. You probably can't spend enough time doing that. I think it's really powerful. And the other part of it is it only takes one apple, right? One apple can change the dynamics. And a 5-person team or a 10-person team, it is unbelievable what happens.
100%. Yeah. It's kind of like pick your sport, but like rowing crew, right? If you've got an 8-person boat, the slowest rower, take them out or you put in someone faster, what happens? The entire boat speeds up. But conversely, if you don't have that, if you have a slower, it pulls back. And John, I think the point you make about we go pretty much almost every quarter, we go through that formation of a team and we plot where is the team, and really helps us that when we do lose or gain a team member that, hey, we need to reform, go back. And just by recognizing that, we can then speed
for
back
sure.
up much faster.
All right, so Bill, talk about a time or a moment where in your coaching journey, you had to deal with something that was uncomfortable but necessary. You had to make a decision, you had to make a move. That's the doom loop.
Every day. I think prior to me taking the position, I haven't dealt with a lot of personnel matters and things like that. And so I really leaned on Glenn in terms of my first firing until I was being coached by Glenn. And that was really hard for me. Even the CEO stuff aside and all that, it was just on a human level, just telling someone
Yeah.
that their future at our company is done was really tough. And so working with Glenn to not only help me in that moment, but then to plan for the future for the next one. Because it's inevitable, right? We're a company of now about 75 people. You're going to have changeover. And so being better prepared for it ahead of time made the next one that much easier. But yeah, the first one sucked quite a bit. But it sucked less because Glenn had coached me and taught me how to be objective and really stick to the criteria that we were looking for, the role, and being simple about it and human about it to a point, but not getting too emotional. That's when I was always thankful for sure to have Glenn on my side.
Yeah, it's huge. How good of you about building that capability in your next level of leadership, Don?
We continue to coach. That's one thing I think I've really improved on, especially since I dumped that COO title, is really focusing on coaching.
Yeah.
And so I meet regularly with each senior team member and we go through their scorecards. We go through any challenges they're facing in that moment. I then transfer the knowledge that Glenn gave me to them in terms of how to address these things, but to also be prepared and potentially prevent it to some degree so that we're only hiring A players, that we don't have to do a lot of firings and that sort of thing. But then recognizing when it's time. The struggle I had, I now see in my teammates.
Yeah.
That decision to end someone's time at the company is an impactful one. It's meaningful. It's has a lot of weight to it. And so as I see them struggle through it, I remember the things that Glenn told me. And so I'm able to then help them through that in themselves. And first one sucks the worst. It gets a little bit easier with each one. Not that it happens with that kind of frequency, but I do see it in them. And I'm thankful for the coaching method and content that I've gotten from Glenn.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about kind of you working as a COO, and when you work as a COO, you couldn't coach, right? So I think Glenn and I kind of think about a guy like you being a CEO, working as a CEO is kind of working in the business. In coaching your leadership teams, it is a working on the business. So you're developing your next level of team to have the hard conversations like you're just talking about in a meaningful way. So how's that transition for you from kind of working in the business, which I think at the beginning was kind of a difficult kind of change evolution for you? One, because you had to delegate, you had to trust people and delegate, maybe not the right people delegate to all that stuff. And it's easy to control stuff, right? It was the same way. What's that like as you think about now working on the business more versus in the business in the last year?
One thing I think that I had to come to terms with was it was okay for that person to make a mistake. Whoever the next person was in line that was going to take that role, they may do it differently, and that's okay. They may make mistakes, and that's okay. And once I sort of got over that hump, was working within the structure and it's consistent with the vision of what we wanted, that was okay. And that got the trust too, but also giving them the grace to form the position and to fall down a little bit. I think of it with my own kids a little bit. Sometimes you just have to be okay with them falling and learning from it. And so that took a little bit. Now, has that translated to me doing that better on some of these other things? Not yet. But I think honestly, just letting someone create their own space within the role was important for me to acknowledge and recognize.
Yeah, that's awesome leadership. That's hard to do, but that's really essential, right? I think failure, making mistakes is part of growth. So I think that's where you learn. That's where your greatest growth comes from, is the things you screwed up, not the things you did right. And if we don't let our people make some of those mistakes, we're holding them back, because that's how they move ahead, is by falling down and skinning your knees a bit. So as leaders, we have the capability.
Yeah.
Hey, Glenn, so what are the things that you think Bill could do to work on the business more versus in the business?
Oh, wow. Good question. I think one of the things he pointed out, even though he's relinquished the role of COO, he really does still help run a lot of things. And so I think this is with every CEO I work with, is continue to focus on what is the CEO's scorecard. And for me, John, is every CEO I work with, I think their number one accountability is to build and empower an A-level leadership team. And I do see many
Yeah.
people and of like, well, okay, well, I'm still going to hang on to this thing. I'm still going to hang on to that thing versus saying, no, you know what? Here it is. I'm giving it over to you or you, and I'm going to be right behind you, and I'm going to be helping you. I'm going to be coaching you. And I realize you're going to make your own mistakes, but this is now accountability is on you.
Yeah.
And that's truly when you start seeing people rise up. And the more that senior leadership team rises up, it raises up that CEO, which then in essence raises the entire company. And that's what enables growth.
Yeah. I think that's a hard journey for a lot of CEOs that have been
Yeah.
operating for a certain way for a long time. Like that is very different. And I think they struggle at times with, what am I going to do if I'm not running estimating or I'm not running operations or whatever it is, right? And I'm running a company.
Yeah.
What does that mean? The analogy I like to use is kind of like you're the conductor of the orchestra. You're not playing the horn section or the string section.
Yep.
You're the one that's
There you
telling
go.
everybody what to do.
Yeah.
And that's the analogy I like to paint. But it's still hard. I mean, it's a hard transition,
Yeah.
but that's ultimately where you have to
Yeah.
get to. And when you put it all together, you make beautiful music.
I remember when I had a check-in with Glenn maybe 2 months into the role, and I remember you're at our coffee shop.
Yep.
And he said, "Are you tired yet of explaining the vision and broadcasting the vision for the company?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Well, then you're not doing it enough." That really hit home. Like, that's my job, right? Is to implement and sell the vision.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't exhausted by it, I wasn't doing it enough.
Yeah.
So
So let me ask you this. What was the mindset shift was most important for you as a CEO?
ask more questions.
Mm,
Ask more questions. That's probably the biggest one, especially as an ops guy, which sort of has this inherent problem-solving
yeah.
nature to it. You immediately
For
want to
sure.
go in and fix it, right? And that just shortchanges a lot of things and doesn't empower people a lot. And so that's one thing I've learned in this role through Glenn and some other things is ask more questions. That's been the biggest one.
That's an awesome answer. I think you're
Cool.
right. I don't know a lot of CEOs would say that, but I think that's a great answer because that's what it's about, right? It's kind of leading the horse to water through those questions. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ask more, tell less.
Yeah.
yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
saying I've heard is be a well, not a fountain.
Huh? Be a well, not a fountain.
A really clear picture of what that looks like, but it's hard sometimes in the middle of it.
Sure is, especially when there's pressure, right? Sort of things are sailing along and that's good. It's sort of easier to give that patience and grace. But when you're in a pressure cooker, and that's a lot harder to do, that's when you really need to subscribe and
Yeah.
stay true to it.
Yeah. When the doom loop starts setting in, pressure starts like, oh, I better get back in there and help. I
Yep.
better go help. Better jump back in. Move away. I can do this. I can do this
Yeah.
better than any of you in your world.
May have done that.
That happens a lot. I mean, that happens
Yeah.
pretty frequently, right? When stuff's going sideways, like you're grabbing a shovel and I don't know, maybe you have to do that every once in a while, but hopefully that's not the norm, right? Where you got to get in there and do those kind of things.
This has sort of come to play recently too, is also leads to some complacency by your team. They become
Mhm.
reliant upon you drilling in,
Yeah.
and then they don't grow. And I think you got to break that habit a little bit for
Yeah.
both people, for both sides.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we see, and I think I was guilty of this too, is I want to be the saver. It may solve the problem right now, but it doesn't help the organization long term. All right. So let's wrap up
Yeah.
with this question. This is kind of our closing signature question.
All right.
If you were
All right.
writing the CEO playbook, what are the 3 things that you tell other CEOs that they should start doing?
I'll go back to my previous one, ask more questions,
Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
be patient,
Okay.
be disciplined. I think as CEOs, we probably put a lot of pressure on ourselves to come in and make change and have quick results. And so being patient to the system, being patient to the people within the confines of the vision and all that, of course, but change takes time and it's not going to happen overnight. And so just being patient, but also being true to it. I think with that patience, there's often a tendency to stray. As long as the vision is clear and you feel good about the path, stay true to it and just be patient with it. Being disciplined means being disciplined around that structure and vision and staying true to it and working in a repeat cycle of how you work through challenges and opportunities and being disciplined within that. If you stay disciplined around the vision and what you're doing, you're going to be much better off. Emotion never leaves the picture, but I think it helps to mitigate emotion and emotional reactions to situations.
Awesome. Those are great answers. I think that's advice that CEOs should be listening to and using every day. So good stuff. So Glenn, you want to wrap it up for us?
Yeah, absolutely. John, thanks. You did a great job questioning from your headquarters there in Detroit, Michigan. Bill,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for you and your team, and I appreciate the opportunity. You guys trust me as your coach.
Sure do.
To get this opportunity. It's really has been a pleasure. And this is Escaping the CEO Doom Loop. And until next time, on our next CEO guest, we'll talk to you then.